Talking about two things today, just about the superannuation system in general and what some of the changes have been and where it's evolved to. The second one will be just looking at the downsizing housing, which now they've incorporated the concept of being able to sell your house, downsize, and potentially, if you've got money left over, can release some capital to make your life a bit better and use that in superannuation, which, as we know, superannuation gives you the only place in Australia where we can give you a tax-free income. So basically we'll just talk about superannuation first because that's the biggest topic for today. And then the second thing we'll look at downsizing houses. So just a quick run through about superannuation. About $2.3 trillion in superannuation in Australia. As you know, it started in 1992.
Russell, could you just move it slightly to the side? So
that's better. Yep. 2.3 trillion in super, started in 1992, and one of the fourth or third biggest pot of superannuation money in the world for a country of only 25 million. So in that time, it's really evolved into a major way of people saving retirement. Before 1992, only 80% of people didn't have a super fund, so they didn't literally have any retirement savings, and they went straight on to the age pension and got the maximum age pension. But of course, in the last 20 years, the actual life expectancy's got higher, so people are living longer in retirement. And of course, with medical technology, people are much healthier in retirement than they probably used to be. So that's the general story with the superannuation. There's various ways you can have superannuation. You can have it in corporate super funds, like if you work for a national bank or BHP. Industry super funds are a big part of it now. So public sector super funds, like in CompSuper, and retail super funds with people like MLC, BT, AMP. Also, there's a whole growth of what we call self-managed super funds, which is quite a large part of it as well. But the main thing that the government's brought out recently is that they're trying to improve the system all the time, and generally each budget there's some reference to superannuation, and the last budget brought out some issues about underperformance of some funds. Some funds, the Productivity Commission came out and found that some funds have been chronic underperformers, and they're wondering why, and they're investigating that. People often change jobs and have a different super fund in a different industry, and therefore end up with multiple accounts. That can eat away fees, mainly in the insurance side of it, because usually there's a default insurance in each super fund. So if you start off in retail, then went to hospitality, then went into clerical work, you'll actually may end up with 3 funds, and each fund's got a default insurance in it. And then there's some funds have got high fees, and some funds have got exit fees. So there's a few issues there, and the Productivity Commission, as I said, looked into this, and probably the biggest thing they came up with was to try and, this hasn't come in yet, but they're looking to have a default 10 funds that are selected by the government as the major 10 default funds in Australia. And that will try and get away from the problems of low returns and high fees. And so they're some of the things. Also, they're recommending self-managed super funds should also only be $1 million plus, because they found that a lot of self-managed super funds have had poor performance. And the other one was, there's a lot of underperforming funds, 1 in 4 underperforming funds, and there's a lot of multiple super funds. So the government's saying, yes, if you have high fees and no performance, it detracts from your returns. And this is sort of giving you a variance of the different amounts you could end up with over a period of time, over your lifetime. So you can nearly double your returns if you have a good performing fund versus an underperforming fund by the age of 67, which is potentially the age when you get to your age pension. The other underperformance is having a better performing fund, and this is showing you another differences in returns. This one was for, the low returns on that one as well. So anyway, looking at fees, that's something the government looked at in the budget this year, and saying having the top 10 funds could get away from the problems of fees. They're abolishing exit fees on funds. Now, most of the time, most funds don't have exit fees anymore. There might be an admin fee, like if you took money out of your fund, there might be an admin fee, but not many funds have exit fees now. And also to make it an opt-in system for life insurance for people under 25. They're arguing that people under 25 don't need insurance. I disagree with that. Still, people have, people under 25 still die. They still have total dependent disabled issues. So I don't know. It's a bit of a bold argument to say you shouldn't have insurance, but they're giving people the option of opting in the future. Duplicate accounts, having more than one accounts. The government's going to try and do something with that by consolidating multiple accounts. The other one was the first home buyer scheme, which we're going to go into more detail today, and the downsizing. So that covers two areas, the first home buyers and people who are selling their homes. Also a fees cap. They're saying that they're trying to cap the fees on funds. And that's going to be for super funds below $6,000 that they can't have more than 3% in fees. And exit fees we talked about, no automatic life cover for under 25s, and duplicate super funds. So that's where the ATO will actually step in and consolidate multiple funds, because the ATO knows your super fund because you've got to give a TFN number when you open a super fund, so they can actually keep an eye on any super funds in the system. Number of accounts that super funds are around, so there's a lot of people, 25% of all individuals have got 2 accounts, so probably don't need 2 accounts unless there's special reasons, but there's a lot, also nearly 10% of people have got 3 accounts, so there's a fair bit of, a lot of population. I think about 11 million people work in the Australian workforce, so there's a lot of people with multiple accounts. This is the number of superannuation accounts. So basically it's dropped a little bit. The number of people with multiple accounts have dropped a little bit, but not significantly, so there's a bit of an issue there. So first home buyer scheme, this is something that will get young people interested, because most people think, well, superannuation's for when I retire and I don't really care, so don't take much interest in superannuation. So this is, I've got a couple of people already set up on this scheme to put money into superannuation to get a benefit on the first home buyer scheme. So basically it's a Commonwealth first home buyer scheme by giving you a tax deduction for putting money into super, because you're only paying 15% tax as it goes into the super fund. They can put up to $15,000 a year for 2 years. They can do it for many other years, but they can only put in a maximum of $30,000. But the main thing is that they're only going to pay 15% tax as it goes in, rather than marginal tax rate. And so most young people would be at least on 34 or 39 cents tax. So a major tax saving by putting it in. And then they save in a couple other ways. First thing is that you generally find a super fund will do better than a bank deposit, because that's their only other option. And so most bank deposits are only getting 1 to 2%. Super funds last year averaged 9 to 10. So they're going to get a better return in the super fund than trying to save in a bank. The second thing is they're able to pull that money out after 2 years, and potentially they get not only the money they put in less 15% tax, but whatever it's grown by. So that means that they can actually even, if they've left it there for, say, 3 or 5 or maybe 10 years, they might be able to get more than 30,000 out, because it's really dependent on how many years they've left it in the fund to grow. And the growth rate on that is the government bond rate plus, the bank bill rate plus 3%. So it's about 5.5%. And that's roughly double what you'd get in the bank. So the actual what you can take out is going to grow each year. And they don't have to take it out after 2 or 3 years. They can just leave it there. If they don't want to take it out, they can leave it there for the rest of their life. But they can take it out. They have to apply to the tax office to get it. The tax office releases the funds from the super fund. And they've got 12 months to buy a house. But it doesn't cover the 9.5% super guarantee. So the employer's money doesn't count. It's only their own money they put into super. So it's a savings program that is just running through the superannuation. Downsizing. This is one which we'll talk about more in detail, but this is only announced in the last budget again, 2017 budget, but it's only come into effect on 1 July this year, so last month. So if you exchange contracts from now and sell your house, you can put up to $300,000 each into superannuation. So the reason for that is that if you're downsizing your house, it may be because you don't have enough money to keep the house going, you need some money to travel, or may have health issues, might need to buy a new car, well, you can release capital out of your house. You can put up to $300,000 each into a super fund and then into a pension fund, and that can be a tax-free income for you to supplement your income in retirement. So, oh, sorry, Dylan, yeah?
If you're over 70 and do that, can you still put that money into super?
Yeah, anytime. You can be 95. Yeah, there's no restrictions. Yeah. So basically, it's the only trigger is you've got to downsize your own home. You actually can even, I understand, you can also sell or rent an investment property and downsize it as well. So it doesn't have to be your own home. So a bit of a way to get people invested into a tax-free environment, and the main issue there is that it releases capital out of your house where you've put most of your money when you're working into your house, and now you can realise some of that value. As I said, you don't have to be under 65 and you don't have to work to put the money into super. So that's the only time when you're not working that you can put money into super, after 65. So the key thing there, it's going to probably open up a lot of people to downsize. One of the arguments is that a lot of people are in the middle and inner areas of the major cities, and those houses are probably too big. You know, people are in 3 to 4 bedroom houses and they probably only need 1 or 2 bedrooms. If you release that capital, release those houses, you effectively allow people who need to be close to the city, who want families who need 3 and 4 bedrooms to move into them. So it's a bit of a way of releasing capital, because, as you know, in Australia we've got high costs of buying a house. The biggest cost is the stamp duty, and that prevents a lot of people from moving their house. So this gives you an incentive to move out of the house if you want to downsize. There's no taxes to go into your super fund, unlike other employer contributions get 15% tax, and it allows you to improve your standard of living. So not a bad concept, and it's something that will be interesting to see as time goes on. A couple of issues with superannuation. One is that obviously women, because they're not in the workforce for full time often, they don't have as much in superannuation. So 50% of women have less than the average that they should have in retirement, and 90% of women will retire with inadequate savings. So there's a bit of issue there for women, and the government hasn't done anything yet on that issue, so it's something they'll probably look at and see if they can allow either women to have higher contribution rates, or maybe a higher super guaranteed contribution. Interesting seeing the average woman gets $157,000 in super, but the median, where most women end up with, only $68,000. So it's a big difference to the median and averages. There's interesting differences. So the government obviously wants to get you to put money into superannuation while you're working, and then you don't have to draw as much welfare in the future. The other issue is that it's going to be now used as a way of helping people get into housing, so through the first home buyer scheme, and releasing capital for your future in retirement. And salary sacrifice is the other issue, that you can now put money up to $25,000, including your employer's money, into super to be a savings plan for your retirement. And then when you do get to the age where you can actually take your money out of super and still be working, you can do a transition to retirement. So that's another way of helping people transition to retirement. So we know about salary sacrificing. Instead of paying marginal tax, you're only paying 15% tax, so it's a pretty good deal. The limitation, of course, is you can't access the money until you retire or when you start transition retirement. So it's quite a good system, and a lot of people are using it. And that's why the government's dropped the rate from $35,000 in contributions down to $25,000, because it cost them too much money. Transition retirement is once you get to your preservation age, you can start that. That's now about age 57, so it's being raised up to age 60 now, so it really limits the number of people who can do it. Unfortunately, in the Commonwealth government, you can't do it. It's only the ACT government who can do it by starting your pension early from the Commonwealth Super Fund. So that's a bit of a limitation in the Canberra. And yeah, so basically there's an advantage is that you can put more money into super than you take out because the income you're drawing out from a pension fund is much less taxed than if you draw it out of your wage. So that's the reason for that. So the evolution of superannuation. So what you could see here is that initially superannuation was just to put money away for your retirement. Now they're seeing a whole range of new areas where it's coming in as a way of social welfare in effect. You're using this money in a number of ways. One is it's tax saving while you're working. Two, it's a low cost vehicle because the government's keeping the fees down, making sure that your costs are not too high. Heavily regulated by the government. It's providing insurance during your working life, and that's not new, but it's just that in the past people didn't realise that they had insurance in their super funds. In the past, you didn't necessarily have default insurance. Most super funds, industry funds, will actually have a default insurance. You don't have to apply for it, it's done at group rates and you get a pretty good rate. Access to some in terminal illness. A few years ago they allowed people with terminal illnesses, that is if you get two doctors say you terminally ill, won't live long, you can access your money at least 6 months before the potential date of your end of life. It helps people maybe with cancer to pay the bills, to get rehabilitation, that sort of stuff. It's a tax-free environment after 60. So the government's obviously wanting you to use an allocated pension in retirement. The only place we can get you a tax-free income is through that, and that's providing for most people, and we've had allocated pensions since 1992, so a lot of people are using that through their retirement to get tax-free incomes. Plus access to the money while they work, while they're retired, and also giving a reasonable return on your money. As we know, you can take lump sums out of your superannuation when you're retired, and we have people all the time accessing money to cover the lump sum needs that you have in retirement. Obviously, on death, it goes back to spouse and children, and that's, the next 20 years will be the first generation where there'll be a large amount of superannuation transferred to children. Apart from the house. In the past it was house and money in the bank and that was it. And it's a low cost investment vehicle because the fees are coming down. Now the fees are coming down for a number of reasons. One is that they've brought in a concept called minor super, which every super fund has to can only have a maximum fee. And also just the economies of scale. When you have so much money invested, you can spread the costs over more people. Allows you to downsize your house and put more money in. And in the 2016, it's announced. Oh, sorry, that's the So the concession on downsizing your house is really about helping people in retirement. So what we're seeing now is that if you go back, say, 100 years, the social welfare system was really the churches. They would provide health through hospitals. They used to provide the schools. Then governments took over. And now we're seeing superannuation actually moving in as a social welfare vehicle. So that's a new concept that in Australia we're doing. Not many other countries have got to this level where they're providing social welfare through their superannuation funds. So it's an interesting concept, and it seems to allow people the choice of getting into investments, understanding investments and providing for their retirement. So the real interesting one though is this one about downsizing a house, and I think this is going to be a big issue for a lot of people. And a lot of the economics of it is that you look at costs and benefits and it's not quite obvious which is going to be best for you, but we thought we'd just put it together in some of the costs and benefits. So there's a lot of people who are now going in over 65, got 15% of the population over 65, 65, and that's growing at a large rate. And so we've got what we call the coffin effect here. Not many people in this group up here. During the 1930s and 1940s, very low population rates, It was in 1947 that the soldiers came back after the war, and then population started to boom after that. So what we're seeing now is that the baby boomer generation, 1947 to 64, they're starting to come into retirement. They're going to put a lot of stress on the whole system, whether it's aged care, whether it's aged pension, the whole system. But unfortunately, we've had over 20 years of superannuation to help that process. But the key thing is there's still a lot of issues to come in the future. So the main thing is, the government's addressing that over time. So they're giving more aged home care packages, and also they're looking at the aged care sector and trying to keep that regulated so it's looks after people. There's a new standard coming out for aged care that's coming out of Retirement Living Code, so it maintains the services in aged care, and that's obviously the end of life, but it's obviously important. Downsizing though. So as I said, you can sell your house, get some capital out and downsize to either 3 areas, either units and townhouses or retirement villages. So I have a lot of people come in and say, you know, what's the best? A lot of people look in at these options, and it's obviously you're going to be going from a house where you usually have on your own block of land, where you've got space, going to be more into a more higher density living. And we're really the first generation of people who are retiring into high density living. In the past, we didn't have a lot of apartments, and we didn't have a lot of apartments with big areas. It was often very small apartments, and also there's a lot of townhouses out there too. But the number of apartments built in Canberra is just enormous in the last, say, 20 years. So they're a big part of it. So first thing with apartments, you're in a strata title. Strata title started in Australia in 1927 in New South Wales. The first country in the world to strata title apartments. So we led the world in strata titling. Now, if you go to Europe or even America, most apartments are owned by one person or one entity. Like in Germany or France, it's owned by a local council, or in America, it's often owned by one investor. So they control the whole building. When you've got strata title, you've got many people all having a say about what should go on. And there's pros and cons in that, but the key thing is that there's going to be a lot of divergence in views. You've got a body corporate in which your views are going to be expressed. And one of the things, if you're going to look at an apartment, is to look at the body corporate meeting agenda notes. That will show up all the issues that are coming up, where there's leakages in the basement, whether there's a lift that needs to be replaced, whether there's balconies. I've heard of people where they've had to chisel off the old balcony because they had concrete in them, and that everyone in the apartments had to pay for that. So it's not something you think of, but these things happen. You still have to buy, because you're buying a property, you're going to have to go up for stamp duty, and that's usually 3 to 4% of the value of the property, and you're going to have the ongoing body corporate fees. You've got common facilities, and you could be close to central locations, which is good for shopping, and you'll have often secure parking underground, and you'll have a fairly high efficiency in the energy rating, because you're effectively not in a house. You've got 4 walls and a ceiling which are exposed to the elements. In this case, you've only really got your front and back entrances, because that's really the exposure to all the weather. So you actually find a lot of people don't really use a lot of energy in these apartments. So something the same. But the cost of common facilities can be high, especially lifts. They're the big thing that if you're going to be in apartments, they often have to be replaced every 5 or 10 years. And then the other ones like gymnasiums and pools. If you're going to go into those, you really want to be able to use them because they're going to be put into your price of your body corporate. The other thing is a sinking fund. Of course, when a new apartment's built, people there's only an estimate about what they're going to do to replenish that building every 5 or 10 years, and it's a guesstimate. And I guess a lot of these apartments are underestimating the sinking fund, and that's why 5 or 10 years later they come up with a huge jump in the sinking fee, because there's not enough being put away. So again, that's something you might be able to pick up in the body corporate notes in the meetings, because they're a public document, seeing what sort of renovation is going to be happening. Also, there might be a conflict between the two types of owners. You've often got renters and you've got the owners who live there. The key thing there is that the owners who live there want to keep the place looking good. The people who are renting, the landlords, they want to get the cheapest cost possible. So you're going to have a conflict between those two groups. So when you look at apartments, you should be looking at how many people own and how many people rent, and you can probably pick that up through the body corporate. But if you've got a lot of renters, they won't really care too much about the property, and so they're going to pull down perhaps the value of the property a bit. If you get 90% of people renting, it's not going to be a good property to be in. Noisy neighbours, well, you can never predict that, but that's one of the pros and cons. And one thing you obviously should always try and work out is how much is the sound insulation between the buildings. So this is just to give you a bit of an idea. This is a one-bedroom apartment in State Circle, so a pretty good location, looking over Parliament House if you like it. It's a very nice sort of looking apartments there, and you're looking around the $500,000. But you only got one bed and one bath and one car space. But it is, for most people who've got houses in, say, the Tuggeranong area, Western Creek area, you could sell your house and still have some money left over and live close to Parliament if you like that sort of thing. Or this is in Forest, so another good area, but again, one bedroom. So $400,000, so it's reasonably affordable for most people. So what sort of costs are involved? We've got a lot of costs in here. These are mainly if you're going to buy, and most people obviously wouldn't be buying, so you won't have mortgage registration, you won't have a loan fee, you won't have a settlement fee, you won't have a lender's mortgage insurance or rate lock fee. That's all if you're going to borrow. But you would have a valuation fee, a conveyancing fee, removalists, building inspection reports, setting up your phone, stamp duty. So if you take up these costs for lending, you're probably around the $15,000, $16,000 mark to buy a property. And that's pretty much the same. It's going to be the same for a house too, so it's not going to be too much different. But it's all based on the value of the property. So then what's the running costs? Now what we've got here is obviously there's insurance for your own contents, strata title fees, and then your utilities. You've still got to pay for those, and your rate. So you're looking around $15,000 a year, and most people would think that is the same cost as living in your own house, because you think, well, the rates are at $2,000 to $3,000. Okay, I'm still going to probably use the same gas and electricity, but you don't have the strata title fee. Well, what does that include? That includes insurance for the property, but it also includes your renovation costs, your sinking fund. And that's what people forget about in their own home, is that their own home, they mightn't do any renovations for 5 or 10 years, and then they do the bathroom and the kitchen. Then they do the garden again, or then they have to repaint the house again. And that's why you're underestimating the cost of living in your own home. That cost is actually a real cost of being in your own home. So it just doesn't come out every year. You might spend $20,000 on a bathroom renovation, and that's effectively 3 or 4 years of the strata title fees. So be aware that there's variable costs and long-term costs that you've got to consider when you're going into an apartment that are probably about the same as living in a house. But then you can come on to retirement villages, which is obviously an area where you're obviously restricted by age because they want to keep the population similar. You've got communities, recreation facilities. Now, again, they're going to be something like an apartment where you're going to be sharing the cost of that, but then there's extra things like emergency call buttons, and you're going to have people the same age group. And I've heard of a lot of people in retirement villages saying they find it very good because everyone's the same. Nobody's racing out the door at 8 o'clock in the morning and the whole place is vacant. There's people still there at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock. There's people around you all the time. And that's a community aspect you can't really sort of factor in if you lived in a townhouse. Average age, obviously, in the 70s, but obviously they're all you know, what I tend to find is people say they look after each other. They're much more community minded. You've got activities maybe involved where they have pool activities, golf, whatever, depending on what place you go to. And each one's going to have a different contract on how they work that out. But basically you're basically buying into a townhouse but with extra facilities. So you've got fees to go into the village, can be a fee there, or recurring fees and a departure fee, but there's no stamp duty because you're not actually buying the land. So to look at some of the costs, this is Bellareve, just across the road here in Lyons. You're looking at, you've got your emergency button, security, car parks for residents, no steps, they're villas or apartments, and you've got all the electricity, water smart metered, so you're only paying for what you use. And of course you're just across the road from Woden, so pretty easy to get your shopping done. Ranges from $450 to $850. You've got a service agreement and a loan deeds, so no stamp duty payable again, and the homes are registered on the land titles office. So but then you're going to pay your normal costs for services. Now, there's no profit in that, so the village is not getting any extra out of it, but basically you're paying around $6,000 to $7,000 a year for the services, but you don't have any personal care. So it's not an aged care facility, but you can get aged care services to come in. And the only way you do that is through through a system of ACAT, where you get a doctor's assessment to come in to get some services. Grange and Deakin, just up from where our office is, townhouses effectively, and you've got emergency buttons, security, recreation areas, swimming pool and spa. So depending on what you want, you know, if you like that sort of thing, that's maybe good for you. But there's no on-site staff to give any services again. So again, you'd have to go through ACAT to get services to come in if you want them. This is what I didn't realise was available. It's actually independent living, where you actually get serviced apartment. So that's something that not a lot of people know about. It's at Grange as well, and you get a Crown lease there again, registered on the titles office. So what you're getting there is something you're getting your monthly. There's a monthly fee, only again to cover costs. But there's a departure fee, and that's where they're effectively covering the cost of the building. So this is costing the normal running costs, rates, gas, electricity, water, but this one down here is to cover the land effectively. So we'll look at the cost of that in a minute, but basically what you're getting is you're effectively getting a service department, weekly cleaning, bed linen, heavy laundry service, community centre, spa and pool. So you're getting a lot of services there. And then you're getting, it's one bedroom, but it's a spacious place. So it's not just a little pokey place. Large bathroom and kitchen. And so that's not a bad sort of story. But look at the cost, $350,000. So it's not a high cost, but what you're losing is the valuation of that, what you get back. So departure fee is 5% for the first 4 years. So it's 20% comes off that, and then after that 2.5% up to 50%. So what that's covering is the cost of of the land, of the building itself. You know, maintaining all the buildings. You're paying for your ongoing fees, but this is to pay for the building cost. And as I said, when you went back to apartments, you're paying something like $7,000 or $8,000 for your body corporate. So that's effectively the same concept as a body corporate fee. So if you stay, I just thought, well, why don't you stay at the abode just down here, which is a service department. You can pay an annual fee if you want, and pay $52,000 a year. So $52,000 is a lot more than 5% of $350,000. Also, you have to find your own parking because they don't have parking. You get service weekly, but you don't really get other services, like you're not getting a pool other things like that. So if you look at the costs there, your actual, if you went to a serviced apartment, you wouldn't be any better off than going to the Grange. You'd actually be worse off in cost. So just giving you a bit of a comparison. So I think with moving is it can be high cost to move. You're looking in Canberra, it's probably $15,000 to $20,000 to move. That's to sell the property. And then you've got costs of body corporate levies in apartments, which cover the costs of running the property. But you're running that maintenance cost is being paid annually rather than in one lump sums like you do in your home. But you may feel a loss of security because you're in a body corporate, and that may be a negative issue in apartments. And then if you do stay in an apartment and you need support, you don't want to go to aged care, well, you can get the home services packages, which are trying to keep people in their own home, whether it's apartment or townhouse, doesn't matter, but it's cheaper for the government to stay in your own home. You want to stay there as well because you're comfortable there, but people come to your own home to deliver the services. So you have to go through the ACAT assessment to get access to that. So it helps people keep in their own homes, enables a bit of choice on what levels of support you want, how much services, and you pay fees as you go on. But most of the fees are paid by the government as you go on. So there's different levels, basic to high care in your own home, and the government's helping out with up to $50,000 worth of services there. So that's a pretty good deal. And you pay depending on whether you're full or part pensioner in that area. So I might go through that. So just a touch on the aged care though. If you go into aged care, there's two fees. One is your ongoing care fee, and then you've got your accommodation fee. And those fees are taken out. So the fee for your care is set at about $50 a day, and that fee is set at 75% of the single age pension. So that can't go more than the age pension basically. Then you've got your accommodation bond. So you can pay that on a daily basis, but most people probably pay it as a lump sum, and that covers the cost of the building. You can also pay daily, as I said, and there's a formula for it. It's about 6% of the value of the bond can be paid daily. So there's the data care fee. And then you've got a mean tested fee if you've got over a certain level on top of that, and then you can pay for extra services if you want. So this is an example of Baptist Care. This is $650,000 deposit, $450 in Jindaleen, I think that's Narrabun, yeah, and one at Queanbeyan. So you can see a range here. They're all roughly this. Well, these two are about the same size, and this one's obviously smaller. Still one bedrooms, and I guess there'll be usually an ensuite with them. I'm not sure, but yeah, when you pay $650,000 or more, or in fact, yeah, once you go over $550,000, you've actually got to get government approval to charge above $550,000 because the government's got to make sure that they've got extra facilities. But just to show you that if you wanted to go into these facilities, you're not talking small money, but you can just either pay that fee or you can pay that fee or a bit of both. So the daily fee can be up to, say, between $60 to $110 a day, but the key thing is if you've got released, if you sold your property, you've got money released to be able to use that. But these properties will have, the higher end properties will have extra services like pool or a gymnasium or something like that extra in there. So that's just to give you an idea of, that's an example of, say, going into aged care rather than just downsizing your home and going to apartment. So there's a number of different options, from units to apartments to retirement villages, and then of course there's limitations on which one's going to be good for you. Obviously, if you go to an apartment, you want a lift. If you're going to townhouses, you want all on one sort of level. Sometimes you might want to have, you know, wider doors because of wheelchairs, those sort of things. But you know, obviously, you have to look around. So it's really a number of different issues. But what surprised me in the whole analysis was there's not much difference in cost to living in an apartment, to living in a house, or a townhouse. The costs are very similar. What's different is that you're seeing in apartments and townhouses, they're seeing it being expressed in that body corporate fee because that's covering the building cost. So what a lot of people do is not really doing a proper analysis when they're looking at the different areas.